So what do we want to do next? Okay, the next thing I think I want to do is I want to add a low fuel warning. Since there's a fuel indicator at the top left of the screen, why not give ourselves a little warning when the fuel starts becoming too low, because in case we're too distracted by all the hectic activity of being attacked by all the missiles and spaceships, then we might lose track of our fuel indicator, and we want a little helpful warning to let us know when we're about to die. So by looking through the listing again, I kind of figured out that a good place for that would be line 156. And let's just scroll down there and see what's in that area now. So if you can see here around line 150, it talks about the fuel display, and it does some calculations and sprite display based on the fuel level. So here's where I'm going to put my line of code, and I'm going to put it at line 156. And so how do I want this low fuel warning to present itself? I want to make it very obvious. So the first thing I'm going to do is just simply change the border color. And I'm going to do that by detecting when the fuel gets too low, first of all. The variable that keeps track of the fuel level is called F2. So first I want to check the fuel level, so I'll put an if statement. If F2 equals, and the fuel level in this game, it actually starts at level 640 and works its way down to 0. So I want to detect when the fuel level gets too low, but I don't want to use a less than comparator to detect when the fuel is below a certain level. If I do that, it will just print the warning and activate this warning every time the fuel level is below that level. So I only want to activate the warning once the level drops below, or rather reaches, a certain level. And in this case I've chosen the level 120, just because that seems to be kind of on the low end, and that seems like a good place to be warned about a low fuel situation. So I'm going to say if the fuel level, which is stored in variable F2, equals 120, then. So after this then statement, I'm going to list a bunch of actions that I want to take place. The first thing of which will be changing the border color. So I'll type border, and then if I put a value of 2, that equates to the color red, so it'll change the border to red. And then I'll put a colon here, which will allow me to type in some more commands that will get executed on this same line once that condition of the low fuel level 120 has been met. So first of all, the border will change to red. And now I also want to print a low fuel warning message, and I'm going to print that at position 2, 2, which is row 2, column 2, which should put it right below the top left corner of the screen where the fuel indicator actually shows. So I'll put a print statement at, and I can use again these percent signs. So I'll put %2, comma, %2, semicolon, quote, low fuel, and then an exclamation mark, followed by a quote. And now I'll put another colon here and keep typing some more commands that I want to execute. So now I also want to put an audible warning. So let's make the beeper beep a few times. So right here in this line of code, I'm going to put a for next loop right here. So I'll put for f equals 1 to 3, colon, beep 1.5, comma, 0.05, and it just came up with those values by experimenting to see what kind of beep sound would sound best using different values. And then finally, after it changes the border to red and it prints a low fuel warning and it beeps 3 times, I want it to change the border back to black. We don't want the border to stay red, right? So we'll put another border command here, and black is 0, so I'll put 0. There, now so when the fuel drops below level 120, it should change the border to red and print a low fuel warning in the top left corner, as well as beep 3 times and then change the border back to color value 0, which is black. So let's go ahead and test that out by running it now. It's always good to obviously to test your program in small pieces whenever you make any slight change so that you don't have a big long bunch of changes that you've made and you have to go back and troubleshoot a whole bunch of code to try and figure out where your bug is located. So we've just made one simple change here to print a fuel warning, and let's run it now and see if it works. So the program has stopped running, so obviously I've made some mistake in my code that's caused the program to crash. So let's see if we can figure out what it is. Oh, and there was a message there. What was it? Let's run this again. Okay, if I press the break key, it says variable not found, line 156. Okay, so let's take a look at line 156, which is the line I just entered, and see what variable it doesn't find. F2. Okay, so the problem is I forgot to put the percent sign in front of this variable f, because the program uses the variable percent %f2 to keep track of the fuel, not just regular f2, and those are considered different. So I need to enter my percent sign, oops, up here in front of the f. So there now I have if percent f2 equals 120, then border 2, so on and so forth, and let's see if it likes it now. Okay, that's better. Now the program's running again, and we'll just see if we can survive long enough to let the fuel get low enough to the point where we'll get a warning. I don't want to crash or it'll start the level again and the fuel will go back up to its maximum level. So I'll just try and avoid all these bad guys until the fuel runs low. Oh, there. So the fuel went low and the border turned red and we got that low fuel warning, but it only beeped once. So I think I know why that happened, and you probably know why too, because if I remember correctly, I don't think I put next F in my for next loop, did I? No, I didn't. So here, after it beeps, you can see over here, we started a for next loop here that counts from 1 to 3, for f equals 1 to 3, and then we put a beep command, but then we never finished our for next loop. So we need to close that off by putting next f right here, and then a colon. There now, so if we run it again, we would expect that it to beep 3 times now, because our for next loop is now complete, which should cycle through 3 times, and which would give us 3 beeps. So we'll just see if I can survive long enough to let the fuel run out here. And there's all these tempting fuel pods just sitting here waiting for me to bomb them, but I can't because I have to wait for the... There we go. So now we got 3 beeps, a red border, and our low fuel warning, which is right here above my ship. You can see. Oh, and the fuel actually ran out to the point that I died. Okay, so good. So this is going along pretty well so far. And our changes seem to be working so far. So far, so good. So when the fuel gets low, that will give us the warning that we just added to the code, which is working well. But what needs to happen as well is when we refuel, we don't need that warning message to be displayed anymore, right? So we need to erase that. Whoops, I'm gonna get killed here. We need to erase that warning message. So here, there, I've bombed a fuel tank and I've refueled my ship, and you can see my fuel level is back up to the top, but the low fuel warning is still there. So the next thing we want to do is get rid of that low fuel warning, and the way we're going to do that is pretty simply just by printing a bunch of spaces on top of it. I kind of figured this out just by going through the code and seeing what areas it made sense to print that, and just by trial and error and experimentation, which is a good way to try to modify an existing program, is by trial and error and experimentation. So that's what I did, and it worked in my case. And from doing that, I was able to determine a few places where I need to make some modifications to print some spaces on top of that low fuel warning message. So the first place I'm going to put it is at line 725. So here you can see line 725. It shows the %F2 variable, which we know keeps track of the fuel, and here it sets it to 640, which is the maximum level for the fuel. So here the ship is being refueled by setting this variable to 640, and it's doing some other stuff and printing some sprites and so forth. So this looks like a good place to erase the low fuel warning, since obviously our fuel is being set back up to its maximum at 640. We don't need a low fuel warning since our ship has been refueled. So let's enter some code here, and I'm going to enter it right here, right before this sprite message. I'm just going to put a print statement, print at %2, %2, semicolon, quote, and then I'm going to put 9 spaces, because 9 spaces will completely erase the low fuel warning. And then I'll put another colon so that the rest of the code on this line will continue to run. But while we're in this line, there's one more thing that we want to do, which is at the end of this line, well, near the end of this line, I want to go over here to just before this go-to statement. I want to put some more code. And what I want to do here is print the level again on the screen, as well as printing the lives on the screen, because this is another place where they need to be updated so that they get displayed properly. So I'm going to do that again by just typing some code here. Print at %23, %0, semicolon, level, space, quote, semicolon. And now I'm going to print the current level that we're on, which is %h+1, because that's how the program keeps track of the level, using h+1. And now I'm going to put another print statement, which will print our number of lives. So I'll put print at %0, %22, semicolon, quote, lives, space, quote, semicolon, and then the variable called lives. So I'll just enter the variable lives right there, colon, and that should finish off our line of code. So I'll press enter now. Okay, so far so good. And there's just a couple more lines that we need to enter to clean up that low fuel warning. And I found that they need to go at lines 840, print, well actually there's already a line 840, so I better go check it out before I erase the current line 840. Ah, yeah, there is. So here you can see line 840 does some stuff, but we also need to use this line to erase our low fuel warning. You can see over here in line 840 something that should be familiar to us now, which is the %F2 variable, which keeps track of our fuel, and it's setting it to a value of 640 right here, which is the maximum value for fuel. So this line is obviously refueling our ship as well for some reason, and I'm going to put a line of text at the end here to blank out that low fuel warning display, and print at 2, oops, I need my % signs, %2, %2, I'll put a space here, semicolon, and then I need my 9 spaces again. 9 spaces, press enter. And I also need to modify line 865 down here. Line 865 has 2 entries where the ship gets refueled right here. F2 equals 640, that refuels the ship, and up here as well, F2 equals 640. So after it does these 2 refuelings for these 2 different conditions, I'm going to print those spaces again. Print at 2, semicolon, quote, 9 spaces, and then another colon, and then again at the end of the line, I'll put another colon, and then print at 2, semicolon, quote, 9 spaces, quote, So now those lines of code should clean up that low fuel warning when we no longer need it to be printed on the screen. So I'm not going to test that at this point. We're just going to keep going here. And oh, actually, there's one more place we need to do that, which is at line 1320. We can see here line 1320 also refuels the ship by setting the variable F2 to 640. So right after it does that, you can see actually here there's a semicolon and then some text here, which is a remark. So you can see in line here, you can actually put a semicolon in line in the text to create the same effect as a rem statement. So all this line of text here at the end, which talks about fuel, position equal fuel, divided by 10, so forth, this is just a remark. So this is not code that's being executed by the computer. So right after this section of code here, I'm going to also print those 9 spaces to blank out the low fuel warning because it's just refueled the ship here by setting the variable F2 to 640. So I'll print at 2 semicolon, and again I'm putting those percents in front of the numbers to convert them into integers, and I'll put my 9 spaces, quote, and then I need a colon at the end here so that it can process this next semicolon, which is acting like a rem statement, a remark statement, and I'll press enter. So now our low fuel warnings should be getting erased at the proper times when we no longer need them to be printed on the screen.